right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar as you file in. Today's webinar is How Coaching and Mentorship Elevate Business Metrics and Client Service, and it's brought to you by MassMutual. I'm Greg Greenberg from InvestmentNews, and I will be your host. So just a heads up, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section of the chat, and we'll get to them during that portion of the program. So now let's talk about the program, because it really is a great one. We have a fantastic speaker today in Vaughn Bowman. He's the head of MassMutual Wealth Management, where he leads the ongoing development and growth of MassMutual's financial advisory business through delivery of world-class investment planning, lending, and trust products and services, all of it. And the destination of choice for wealth advisors, MassMutual's wealth management subsidiary, is an investment advisor and broker-dealer with over $245 billion in assets under management, offering over 6,500 advisors the freedom and flexibility of independence, combined with the extensive resources that you need to run your business. And that's what it's all about, is your business. Also, you can confidently serve your clients' best interests. So right now, as you're getting comfortable, I'm going to hand it over to our panelist, Vaughn. He's going to kick off the presentation. I'll be back for polls and for Q&A. But right now, take it away, Vaughn.
Hey, thank you, Greg. And hello, everyone. It's a real joy to be here with you talking about one of my absolute favorite topics, which is how to optimize financial advisor performance with a particular focus on teaming and on coaching, which really makes all the difference. This is near and dear to my heart across my career on Wall Street, and now over the last nearly 3 years, working with MassMutual's 7,000 financial advisors. This has become a real passion of mine. And if you do happen to be a financial advisor out there tuning in to this webinar, let me say first and foremost, congratulations. I am thrilled for you that you've chosen one of the most noble professions out there. And the sky is really the limit for you as we sit here in 2024 for your profession and your career growth. I don't need to tell you, but I will remind you, because sometimes it's helpful and healthy to do that we have $84 trillion in client assets in transition in this country over the next 20 years. And these are clients across America that desperately, desperately need your help and your financial advice. At the same time, we have a full 40% of financial advisors that plan to retire within the next 10 years. There is a financial advisor shortage in this country. And what's more, 60% of clients, when they're asked a question, tell us that they are not fully satisfied with their financial advisor. Now, if that doesn't get you excited about what you do for a living and the impact that you can bring to your clients, then I don't know what will. And for those of us who are not financial advisors, and we have the privilege of working with you and serving you and doing everything we can to help you reach that incredible success that's within your grasp, to serve more and more Americans who need that financial advice so desperately, we are consider it a complete privilege. And with that preamble out of the way, let's get into the meat of the webinar. I'll spend a little moment on what we're going to cover today and a little bit of an agenda, and then we'll dive right in. So the agenda today is going to be very simple. We're going to do a few kind of fun poll questions along the way, but by and large, it's going to focus really only on a couple of things. And I hope you find it informative. The first is essentially how advisor practices are evolving over time and the benefits as we see it, and as a lot of evidence throughout the industry demonstrates, the benefits of teaming and coming together to form a professional business organization to serve your clients. And then what does it mean to get coaching to increase your chances of success? Do you need a coach? Is that something that will help you get where you're trying to go as an advisor in this industry? My argument is yes. And as we go through this, hopefully you'll come to agree with me. And then finally, just some best practices, things that work, things that don't work, as I talk to financial advisors across the industry. And I'm sure we'll have a robust discussion in the chat, and other people will have plenty of insights to be able to share on how to form and maintain truly world-class practices. So with that, let's take a step back and think about why becoming a solo practitioner, being a solo practitioner or joining the industry as a solo practitioner is just becoming more and more difficult. And it really boils down to a number of different things that are happening out there in the industry, in society at large, and in client expectations. First of all, product complexity is getting off the charts different. This is not the same way that the product landscape looked in 2000, 2010, even 2020. The variety of options, the variety of ways that clients can solve their needs with the products that are available is just getting more and more complex. And clients expect to be presented with all those options. The regulatory environment has gotten more intense. You think about something like cryptocurrency was not even on the radar 5 years ago. You think about all the other ways in which the regulatory environment is evolving, the more complicated tax landscape that we all face, the tech advancement that has provided clients with an expectation that they can do anything, anytime from their mobile devices. All that tech advancement, all those complexities really makes the burden on the financial advisor to be able to step up to the plate and meet client expectations, and client expectations are higher and higher. And what I would posit is that it's potentially impossible for one advisor to be amazing at all the things required to be able to keep up with these industry trends and these changes. So when you think about portfolio management, you think about client service, you think about estate planning, you think about tax law, you think about behavioral finance and the good old-fashioned service that clients need. Can you do all that? And that's why we find with MassMutual and our sales force and across the entire wealth industry that more and more advisors are either taking a hard look at evolving to a team structure or have already done so. So at this point, I think we have our first poll question. Greg, if you want to bring it up, I'm very curious to see how folks answer this one.
All right, folks, the first question, as you can see, is what does your practice look like? So are you a solo advisor? Are you an advisor on a team? Are you not an advisor but work with advisors? Are you not an advisor but play one on TV? So fill up the poll, and we'll see where it go, and then we'll get the results. But in the meantime, let's go back to you, Vaughn.
Thanks, Greg. Now, I will say there is no one right answer here. I have met and worked with incredible solo practitioners in my career. But if you look at the direction of travel, the movement in the industry, you start to see more and more advisors evolving towards a team practice. Looks like we got our results back here.
Yeah, I'll read those for you if you want. All right, so in terms of solo advisors, 26%, advisor on a team, half of the folks, 50%, not an advisor, work with advisors, 24%. So there's certainly something in today's presentation for everybody. So it's a great time for you to get into it, Vaughn. So that's our audience. Speak to them,
Absolutely, yeah. And it's so funny because that really reflects what we see at MassMutual and what I've seen throughout my 20+ year career. It's an evolution, and there really is no one right answer. What we tend to find, and there's a slide in here that kind of shows an evolution from solo advisor to doing some joint work to starting to form a work group to forming a more formal business. And I think that's on the next slide, if we can advance one more. One more, please. There you go. So you can kind of see in this continuum, not that it's always a straight shot, but it does reflect a little bit of an evolution as advisors grow up in the industry and as they deal with all those pressures and all those different forces in the industry that I talked about a little bit earlier. It's funny, we have an advisory body to management that I love talking to and is incredibly influential in shaping the products, the people, the platforms that we offer to our financial advisors. It's called the AAX at MassMutual. A few weeks ago, one of our best financial advisors, Maurice Clark, said something in our last meeting with the AAX that really stuck with me. He said, Vaughn, what tends to happen is that as we grow as advisors and we get better and better at winning clients and serving clients, we become what he called accidental CEOs. And that phrase stuck with me because I think there's a lot of truth to that. when you think about the skill set that it takes to become a fantastic financial advisor, that's not the same skill set that it takes to run a sophisticated multi-million-dollar business. It's just not. Now, you can have both, but you have to be very intentional about going out and acquiring the skills you need to have both. And a lot of the times, an advisor can't quite make that leap from being an amazing practitioner, an amazing advisor, to being a purposeful CEO. And when you think about it this way, when you offer service and as you get better and better at it, more people will want it. You'll have more choices about where to offer it, when to offer it, what's the process that you use, and how much you charge. And I'll give you kind of a goofy analogy, but bear with me. This is really not that different from a driver who offers people a ride to wherever they're going. And the question you have to ask yourself is, do you want to be the cab driver at the airport who's handing out little business cards? Or do you want to be Uber? Which business model do you want to aspire to? And I think there's some truth in that when you think about the practice that you run, the clients that you deal with, and how you view your legacy over the next 10, 20, 30 years. So if you do decide you're ready to evolve, take your practice to the next level, and turn that practice into a business, what does that get you? And if you turn to the next slide, you can see some of the benefits of that evolution. And this is really kind of a sample in my mind. It's not comprehensive, but if you think about it, the efficiencies that come with dividing and conquering and having people on the team to help you with all those many, many tasks that you need to perform, that's a benefit. You have succession planning that you have to think about. We got a slideshow hurricane going on here. Okay, we're back on the slide. It simplifies succession. It simplifies succession, which is something that's obviously important for many, many advisors. It provides an edge in the M&A front, meaning that when you get to scale and when you can have all those right processes to run your business, you will have an opportunity to go out and acquire another practice. We see this a lot in our advisor body, and I think it's really, really important. This is where either within your own firm, and we see a lot of this at MassMutual, or whether there's somebody outside of your ecosystem and somebody that you meet as another financial advisor, maybe they are one of that 40% that I mentioned that's coming up on a retirement, and you're a younger advisor, you're ready, you have a practice, you may be able to do some M&A activity, incorporate that client base, and benefit from that growth over time. You really can't do that, at least not as effectively, without being a part of a team. So that's a big deal as well. You're also finding, what I'm finding and what advisors are finding is that young talent in the marketplace that can really go out and crush it in terms of the back office work, the portfolio management, or even the client service and relating to the next generation of clients. If you've got a matriarch or patriarch and you need that next generation, getting a 20-something or a 30-something into your practice, having a team and having a structure is just that much more appealing. And of course, you can tap into a network of experts much more readily. And when you're sitting across the table from a client and he or she brings up something, you don't have to look with a blank look on your face and say, let me get back to you on that. You actually can say, I have somebody that I work with in my network that can solve that problem for you, and let me introduce you to this person, whether they're on the team or they're a resource that you can tap into. And then finally, it's building transferable value. Listen, the environment right now, I said it before, there's never been a better time to be a financial advisor. If you can capture that value and really create something special in the business that you're building, that's what it's all about. And the chart on the right just simply shows income goes up as the service team behind you goes up in size. So I'll leave it there on that one. I think
Vaughn, I'm sorry for jumping in, but Keith Schmidt had a great question, and before we move ahead, he asked, and once again, we're going to get to Q&A at the end of the session, but he had a great question. He says, it's interesting going from 3 to 4 on a service team showed little growth in income. So he was just wondering, why that happens. Maybe you know, maybe you don't, but I just wanted to flag that here. And thank you, Keith.
That's a great question, Keith. The way that I think about this is that there is a critical mass element. And I think it's different in every practice, and sometimes statistics kind of wash this out. But my takeaway from this chart and what we've seen is, and it's different for every team, but there's a critical mass. And what I mean by that is when you are cooking with gas as a practice and you have all the right processes and all the right workflows and routines and ways of dealing with clients, that's when you really take off. That's when you really unlock the value. What you want to have is that senior advisor spending as much face time as humanly possible with clients and prospects, and you have a well-oiled machine behind you to be able to do that. So what this chart tells me is that the point of critical mass, where you kind of get over that hump and you have enough people behind you in the office doing that client service, so that you as the lead advisor can get out there and do your client acquisition, which is the lifeblood of every practice, and meet face-to-face with your most important clients. That just goes way up. And that's how I interpret that kind of giant leap there between 4 and 5. I don't think it's the same in every practice, but I think that's what that's illustrating. Great question. All right, so the other thing, and this is the question I would encourage everybody to ask yourself. As you look at this slide, there's a lot on this slide. There's, I think, 18 different, call it specialties or expertises. I won't read off each one, but these are all the things that demanding clients, and all clients are getting more and more demanding, need you to bring to the table when you work with them. And the question you have to ask yourself is, are you really prepared to offer all these services? Do you have it down like a science that when somebody comes in, and I'll pick one at random, somebody wants to talk about advanced markets and financial planning. I'm just picking underneath the expertise bucket on the top right. Do you have an answer? Do you know exactly who is on speed dial for you to be able to provide that insight? You don't have to be an expert at everything, but do you know how to answer the question when it comes from the client? And do you know how to bring in the right expert? Now, you may also be looking at this slide and you may be thinking, Vaughn, this is only true for $5 million clients, $10 million clients. You know what? That may have been true 10 years ago. It's not true anymore. I'm here to tell you, across the spectrum of all net worths, clients expect these things. And as I mentioned earlier, it is incredibly difficult for one advisor to be able to provide all these things at a high level of service that your clients need. And that's just going to get more difficult over time. So now let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about coaching. And this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart. I think we might have one more poll question here about coaching.
All right, I'm going to step in, and here's the MassMutual poll question. If you've worked with a business coach, what stage of your business did they help you with? So is it having worked with one, established my teaming practices, or established my overarching business strategy? Vote now.
And just as an aside, you know, this is near and dear to my heart because I've had several great mentors in my career. I've also had several fantastic coaches without whom I simply would not be where I am today. And I know a lot of advisors that have exactly the same experience. But I do want to make a distinction between the two. A mentor is fantastic. He or she can give you invaluable advice as you progress throughout your career. You can check in with them. And I'm sure many of you have mentors. Coaches are different. And now I'm seeing in the poll, actually 46% of you haven't worked with one, which is really interesting. So for those that do, you know, I'm obviously very curious about the effectiveness of it, how it's worked. It looks like 15% of you have done it around teaming, and 38% have done it from an overarching business strategy, which is encouraging. That's great. But there's still almost half of you that have not worked with a coach before, which is really interesting. But I will say, and you know, a mentor provides all these great things. A coach is a little bit different. And like I said, I've had both before. What a coach does, and how I would think about it, is a coach is someone that you can enter into a more formal relationship with, where their job, and you know, the majority of the time you're going to pay them for this, their job is to maximize your chances of success as you define it. So when you hire a coach, you can work together to define what the end goal is, what the signposts along the way are towards the success of your practice, talk about the struggles along the way, and their sole job, their only job, is to help you get there. And that's why I believe in the power of coaching. Now, I will tell you, it takes a leap of faith. Whether your firm provides a coach or you pay for it on your own dime, you really have to be humble. And honestly, you have to admit to yourself, I went through this myself, you have to admit deep down that you can be better with help from others. You have to be able to believe in your heart that 1 + 1 can equal 3, and that you have this opportunity to listen and to get that feedback and get that advice. And that really speaks to the entire mentality also of forming a team. You can't form a team if you're anchored on the idea that you know best all the time, right? And I know I'm preaching to the choir. I don't think you'd be here on this webinar if you really believe that, but it's that mental leap that you can be better with help. And it's that further mental leap that you can actually pay for somebody to really help turbocharge your career. And I will tell you, it works. I'm here to tell you, I can't even think of an example where I've asked somebody after they've hired a coach, was it worth it? And did you get more out of it than you put in? Unequivocally, the answer is yes. It was unbelievably worth it, and it helped turbocharge what I was trying to accomplish. Now, finding that coach, we'll talk a little bit more about it. It's difficult, and it's a little bit of a game of matchmaking, just like it is with teaming, but that really speaks to the entire challenge. The thing I like about this slide in terms of drivers of team performance, and this reminds me a little bit of the Einstein quote where they said, if you had an hour to save the universe, what would you do? And Einstein said, I would take 58 minutes defining the problem and only 2 minutes solving it. And what he meant by that was the importance of the upfront analysis, the design, the structure, the asking the hard questions, the roles and responsibilities. Do I have the right people? Do I have the right workflows? Do I have the right separation of duties? Is everybody on the same page with the plan? Do I have a well-designed business plan? The success of your team's performance, according to this chart and the research that's behind it, is going to be at over half, 60%, dependent on how well you do that. Now, you need coaching throughout the process. You need that ongoing coaching. You need coaching when you get off the ground and you launch, but it's that front work, it's that preparatory work that's going to set you up for success, which is hugely important. And by the way, some of you listening may be coaches working with advisors. We have a practice management department at MassMutual dedicated to this. I'd love to hear insights from you. I think it's an incredible two-way street, and sometimes you find people that benefit from a coach end up being coaches themselves in one way, shape, or form, or certainly mentors. So let's move to the next slide and talk a little bit about coaching and how it's distinct and maybe a little bit different from the other concepts that are linked to it, like training and managing. So when you think about training, and I'm on the right side of the page here, you're delivering content, or you're getting content, you're getting taught skills, you're focused on very specific things. When you're being managed or when you're managing people, you're getting feedback, you're setting expectations. Coaching is different. The first time I ever met with my coach, and I've had several, the first time I met with my current coach, there was a lot of listening, a lot of observing. In fact, my coach, one of his specialties is he just comes to your office and he sits in your office like a sort of awkward visitor, and he sits in the corner of your office and he watches you work. He watches you interact with the folks that you interact with every day, clients, advisors, home office folks, and he just looks and listens and asks questions and is anchored completely and totally on your success. Is what you're doing the best use of your time? Are you working with people who are helping you get there? And what are your chances of achieving the success that you want so badly? So being able to bring in somebody like a coach to do this also empowers the team to ask all those same questions of themselves, and it gives you an objective view. This is one of the things that I like the most about having a coach. It's somebody who doesn't necessarily have any axe to grind. They don't have any personal stake in it other than in your success. Objectively, they want you to succeed. They want the team to succeed if you provide a coach for the entire team. In some ways, they're like half psychologist and half business coach, business trainer, and they can be of tremendous impact in unlocking potential and maximizing your performance. And if you go to the next slide, there's a psychologist back in the 60s. He was a guy called Bruce Tuckman, an expert on team dynamics. It's what he came up with as stages of team development, I think, are still true. They're still applicable today. He's got kind of a cute mnemonic to kind of think about the stages of team development. It's forming, storming, norming, and then finally performing. And, this is, the formation of the team first. Then it's sorting through all that stuff that I talked about as the critical, more than 50% of the importance of the success of team formation around, what are the roles and responsibilities? How do people feel about that? Who fits where and when? All that stuff is critically important. And then the norming is, do we have the same set of values? Do we have the same common understanding of how we're going to serve clients? And then performing, of course, is putting that all into practice. If you go to the next slide, I think there are so many different elements here at each of these stages. When I think about, forming is sort of like, okay, what's my hypothesis of who's on the bus, who's going to be part of this team, and making some judgment calls there, subject to change over time. But then when you get to the storming part, where you're establishing those processes, you're establishing trust. One of the things that we have about 60 firms around the country within MassMutual, and many of them have met tremendous success by using some of these psychological inventory tools that kind of peek under the hood at who the team members are as people. How do they work? How do they function? How do they learn? How do they communicate? And everybody is different. However, people can be defined in a very useful way by the style of all those things I mentioned, the learning, the talking, et cetera. And it mentions here on the slide the DISC profile, also the Colby assessment. You pick your medicine, pick your way of doing this, but I'm a strong believer that this is important to try to understand each other as team members, evaluate the results of that profile. It will tell you, how do you like to make decisions? What rubs you the wrong way? Where are you really in your comfort zone? What are you best at? And that goes from everybody from an sales assistant all the way up to the most senior advisor on the team. If you do this and you have those insights, you will be able to work better as a team. So I think that is critically important. We've seen that succeed in our company. And then, stepping back under the norming step, just roles and responsibilities. There's something called a RACI matrix that we use here at MassMutual, where becomes very clear who's responsible for what, who's accountable for what, who has a role, who has a say, and who has the final decision. These are really hard questions. I mean, I will say you have to devote the time, the energy. It is not easy, but the payoff is you have a well-functioning team that can grow and just crush it in the marketplace as a team of financial advisors. And then, of course, there's performing and there's adjusting and delegating tasks and projects across the team. So if we move on to the next slide, I think we might have one more poll question.
Yes, I love
Greg,
these
you want to take
questions. Oh yeah. All right. So what are your biggest challenges in teaming? Is it finding the right partner? Personal team dynamic conflicts? Fights? Or is it finding the time and skills to lead people? There's never enough time, I suppose. So place your votes now.
All right, as we're waiting for the poll results, let's talk about some of the non-fun stuff. So this is the sort of more darker side, I guess, of the webinar. Some of the things that go wrong. And I'm sure that you guys in the audience will have some great insights into this, either from personal experience or from fear. But if you go to the next slide, there's some analysis that's been done on dysfunctions of teams and what can go wrong.
Should we give the answers before we give the dysfunctions?
Go for it. Yeah.
All right. So here, the biggest challenges in teaming: finding the right partner, almost half, 47%. Personal team dynamic conflicts, only 9%. Everyone gets along, right? And then finally, finding the time and skills to lead people, 44%. There you go.
That maps really, really closely with what I've observed in our financial advisor population. So thank you, Greg. I think the finding the right partner part is so challenging. If you find the right partner, you don't necessarily have the conflict and the team dynamic challenges that in the second response there. And then, if you are able to do it, you've got to be able to devote the time and attention to that leadership work. And I didn't say this was going to be easy. And I know you guys know that out there. You really have to make a conscious effort to be a leader as a senior advisor on a team and to create that culture. And that is a very different skill set from what you do every day as a financial advisor serving clients. So that's the trick. And I'm not surprised at all on the polling answers. So let's talk about the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Now, again, some may suffer from this. Some, it may be a risk that you just have to try to navigate. No team is perfect. All these things come up one way or another. But you've got potentially inattention to results. You've got an avoidance of accountability. You've got potential lack of commitment from some of the folks on the team. You've got fear of conflict. This happens in every organization. And then the worst one and the most sort of foundational problem is that absence of trust. Now, this is why, if you weren't convinced before, this is why I pound the table and say having a coach and having somebody objective to help you set up a team and understand the right way to do so and all those processes and procedures is really, really critical. On the right-hand side of the page, there are some sort of guidelines for finding the right ideal coach. Somebody who has a track record, somebody who has focused on helping others, somebody who's been in the industry before. I think there are some amazing coaches out there, but if you have somebody who's dealt with financial advisors before, you're probably going to have a higher probability of success because they know our business, they know what we do. And then, somebody that you gel with, somebody that you can trust and that trusts you and that is objective and is not afraid to give you negative feedback. And for you to have a thick enough skin to be able to recognize that there may be a better way to do something. And it's somebody who's inquisitive. And now I will say, the one thing that came up in the polling question, which is a really tricky one, is, how do I find the right people? I've talked to a lot of advisors. I talked to another advisor the other day in New Jersey who, tried to find the ideal match, and it just was not the ideal match. They brought somebody in, they thought this was going to be a great thing, and ended up getting a divorce essentially as a business partner, and that is disruptive. It just derails your journey, and I think that either the reality of that or the fear of that sometimes is what causes advisors to pause a little bit about that team formation or maybe not be as efficient as they could be. And I think it's a really important question. I don't think there's one silver bullet or right answer to that. What I would say is, what I've seen from some of our best advisors is a little bit of try before you buy, a little bit of sort of trial partnerships, some joint work, kind of putting the toe in the water of what is it like to work with this person. And if you do that and you start seeing good results and you're a good mesh and a good fit with a coach and some of that objectivity, you have a really good chance of success. And one other thing I'll share, you out there, you may have seen the same thing or experienced the same thing. Some of our best advisor teams, I'm thinking of one that we have in our Boston area, a fantastic high-performing team with tremendous success. And the 2 primary members of that team, they have other staff members, they could not be more different. And I think that's whether you're talking about any kind of relationship, sometimes that can work. Sometimes you get somebody, and in this particular example, the advisors I'm thinking of, you have one that's incredibly analytical, incredibly detail focused, incredibly knowledgeable about the products and the services and kind of the behind the scenes of how you do right by your clients across all those dimensions. And then you have the other advisor who is a rainmaker, and he is incredibly personable, and he is behaviorally astute, and he goes out and meets with clients and takes them to ball games and does all that stuff. You know what? They are an amazing team, but they couldn't be more different, right? So sometimes it's the yin and yang that puts it together. There's no secret, method of finding out whether you're going to gel with somebody, with one person or more than one person. But what I would say is there are plenty of ways to dip your toe in the water. And if you are large enough as an advisor where you can afford potentially to take somebody on a salary basis as opposed to a grid payout basis, if that's a thing, that's something I've also seen. Because if you bring somebody on a salary bonus basis or on a trial basis, if things don't work out, it's probably a little bit easier to change that. So all kinds of ways you can address those particular challenges, but they are real and they are meaningful in terms of your journey to becoming a high-performing team. Let's talk for a second about what you should be looking for. When you think about, if you go to the next slide, what you should be looking for in a firm, whether it's the back office, whether it's the local support. This is the stuff that a really strong wealth management back office and local value prop can deliver for you. And, I think when you go through this, I won't call out each one of these, but you don't have to go it alone, whether it's, coaching programs that are available, practice management. We happen to, at MassMutual, have invested recently in a really robust practice management program that helps advisors through some of these tricky questions around how to combine, how to figure out grid versus salary bonus. We have a robust teaming program where junior advisors can take advantage of higher grid rates from senior advisors. How do you manage that? So we're investing a lot of resources into teaming and into practice management. You want to look for a firm that can do that because it's just so important. Does your company have best practice sharing? Do you have the ability to interact with really great advisors and learn from them? Do you have recognition events and ways in which you can interact with the best advisors at your company and learn from them? Do you have the right technology? Do you have the right CRM? And do you have opportunities to get better and better, whether that's learning and development or whether concierge services for really high performing teams? So, this is just a little bit of a checklist of things. I would encourage you to, take a screenshot of this. And if you are contemplating, what's the right place for me to hang my business and do what I do as an advisor and continue that growth journey and team with people, I'd encourage you to take a screenshot of this and really think about, as you're interviewing companies or as you're interviewing your current company and evaluating what you do, use this as a checklist for your success to maximize that. Whether you're a solo practitioner or a team-based advisor, but particularly if you're a team-based advisor. And then, of course, I'll close it out. I'd be remiss if I didn't say I'm incredibly passionate about what we're building here at MassMutual, the value prop we provide advisors. We provide advisors with a great boost towards that success opportunity I talked about earlier. We have over 700 back office employees, over 100 CFA, CFP, other investment professionals that stand behind our advisors. We have a world-class open architecture system, world-class investment offering, and over 60 firms across the entire country with tremendous local support. So, hopefully you found this interesting. I know we still have quite a bit of time left, so
we will have quite a bit of time and quite a few questions as well. Would you like to answer a few, Vaughn?
Excellent.
Okay, so here's a question. Does one start with, quote, joint work as the initial entrance into becoming a team, or tell one's GA to get their help? What's the best practice?
So I think for advisors, wherever they work or wherever they affiliate, you're going to learn a ton just from doing joint work. So this is dipping your toe in the water. This is identifying a client opportunity where you either have sought out or somebody else in the office or somebody else that you're friendly with that's a financial advisor that provides a level of expertise that you just don't have. And again, this takes some humility, but being able to know that and then being able to dip your toe in the water and share that revenue from that client, which again is a little bit of a leap of faith. You got to do it. You got to see how it feels. You got to see how the roles and responsibilities go. You got to understand whether this is a yin yang type of thing or whether you gel. That's where I would begin. Now, if you have a branch manager, complex manager, general agent, firm, whoever running the firm, you should be very vocal with that leader that you're interested in finding ways for 1 and 1 to equal 3. And the chances are, if they're worth their salt, they're going to be either playing matchmaker and helping you find somebody that can be that yin to your yang, or they'll at the very least enabling it, encouraging it, and supporting it. So hopefully that helps.
Another question about that slide where I had the previous question. The question is the bump from 4 to 5 service team members is all about getting to the strategic business development and investment process efficiencies of having the quote extra person. Do you agree with that statement?
I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, I think that's spot on. I do think that varies depending on the team, but I think that sentiment is spot on.
So here's another question is, when you keep adding, when do you get to the point of marginal diminishing returns? So we have a question about, what's the average annual salary for a full-time employee? So can you talk about how much you're going to be paying these folks once you start taking them on and paying the coaches? Because, I know you got to spend money to make money, but you still got to spend money.
I think it varies. I think you have to decide for yourself. And I have some views that I'll share, but you have to decide for yourself how much of the value prop of what you deliver to your clients comes from you personally, comes from your team as a whole, and comes from home office or whatever platform you're using. So I've seen advisors who have 10-person teams, incredibly successful, and they have 2 people on the team that are CFAs, run portfolios, and are incredibly smart, and they help run everything from an investment perspective. I would argue that with more sophistication, more centralization, more models becoming available to advisors across the industry, we certainly see this with what we're doing. Not every team needs to have an army of CFAs within that team that are running money and making trades. There's a lot of risk to that. There's a lot of variability to that. If performance doesn't go well, you have to explain that to your clients. So what we're seeing, and what I think is probably the direction of travel that I would encourage people forming teams, is actually to move away from that a little bit and to think about how much you can outsource to that home office platform, provided you have a good one, and provided you have great model portfolios and great thought leadership coming to you as an advisor, which I'm proud of what we have at MassMutual, but there are thousands of opportunities and great firms out there that do that. Do you really need to have that function sit on your team? Now, you may think that you do, and that may be part of your unique value proposition to the client. From a service perspective, there are ways to automate that. There are also ways to take a look at your book, and as you evolve, you may find yourself with clients that you've had for many years that might not meet your either minimum standards or can make the best full use of your value proposition. That's another conversation. Another phenomenon that happens with advisors is they wake up one morning and they have 2,000 clients. Who can service 2,000 clients, right? Even with an army of team members and staff members, you may need to think about what's the optimal number of clients you have and what's an optimal number of staff to have. So you're right. I think it does get to diminishing returns, but it all depends on that business model. And I would encourage all our advisors who are listening here to try to find a place that gives you the latitude and the freedom to be able to decide that for yourself and then get the support you need from the platform, the back office, and from your fellow advisors.
All right, we got more. So can you share a personal example of an eye-opening revelation you learned about yourself or your business from a business coach or a mentor? Putting you on the spot, Vaughn.
Oh, boy. With every role, and this goes for being an advisor or it goes for being kind of a home office professional, any kind of financial professional, you find yourself balancing change versus stability. and this is, I'm not to get too philosophical about this, but all of us in one way, shape, or form need to drive on our business and create success for the organizations that we work for. One of the things that I found the most compelling about my coach, and again, I'm not an advisor, very different world, is that occasionally when I'm struggling with a decision and there's a little bit of tension and I could go one way or I could go another way, he brings me back to my purpose, why I'm doing what I'm doing, and he encourages me to push the envelope. When I think about, should I do a change? Should I make a bold move? He reminds me that in many ways, that is my purpose, is to make bold moves and bold choices. And he gives me a little bit of a boost of confidence to be able to do that.
Love it. Okay, here's a question. In your experience, are these teams best built around a rainmaker or with moderate advisors joining forces?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Do you need a big straw to stir that drink?
That's a really good one. You know, I've seen both. I think when you have a rainmaker model, you can achieve great success. You also have a lot of key person risk embedded in that business. You have a situation potentially where you can almost get away with not having a really amazing streamlined process and all the things that we talked about earlier in the webinar, you know, the right roles and responsibilities, the right processes. In a way, my fear is when you have one rainmaker that is so excellent at getting in front of clients and closing clients, you can almost get away with a lot, you know, less efficiency. My preference is to the role where you have, just like you said in your second example, where you have 4 or 5, you know, maybe they don't have the charisma of the rainmaker, but they can join forces and have a repeatable process. It's not as dependent on any one member of the team, and they can play to each other's strengths and create a process. So if I had to pick one, it would be that one. And I think that that's probably also a way in which the industry has been evolving over the past couple decades.
Okay, let's talk timing. The question is, what's an optimal time frame for one to build out a team?
So if I take the question to be, you know, how long does it take to get from A to B? Again, I think it varies, and I think there's no one silver bullet or right answer. What I've seen with some of our best advisors at MassMutual is a journey of 2 or 3 years to get from A to B, fully get from A to B. So you have to have a commitment. You have to know what you're trying to do. You have to be willing to fail potentially or have a few bumps in the road. You have to commit to it for multi-years. And then on the other end of the rainbow, you end up with a process that's amazing and it's sustainable. And then you're off to the races potentially for decades and decades to come. One of our most successful teams in the Washington, D.C. area, I was just down celebrating some of their successes with a client event. And, you know, they were celebrating their 5-year anniversary as a formal team. They've achieved amazing success. They're one of our best teams and a bunch of, you know, very good guys to boot. They worked together for many years before they were a formal team. So every path is a little bit different. Sometimes you date before you marry. Sometimes you do joint work, you get more formal, and that happens over years as you build trust with somebody, and then you kind of formalize it. So it can be decades in the making. I think if you're going into it, you should probably, just like any business owner, you should have a multi-year horizon to be able to execute on it. That doesn't mean you won't start to see results early, but you got to be realistic, I think, about the fact that it takes a few years.
All right, I think we're wrapping up at 11, but we have some more questions. You're a popular guy, Vaughn, so I'm just going to try and get to them. So is it better to have one holistic coach or tap into a variety of coaches depending on your business needs?
I think it depends what you're trying to accomplish. I would start with one. and have that one coach squarely focused on what success looks like for you. I think over time, if you get more nuanced and more kind of into the advanced stage where you're already a really well-functioning team, like let's say you've been through this journey and now you're really cooking with gas, and it's a few years later and you've got everything set, you've used that coach to form your team, and now you're realizing that you are not fully taking advantage of the M&A opportunity of going out and buying another practice, or you're not fully taking advantage of the client acquisition opportunities and prospecting. That's when you may want to tap into a coach that has a specialty in that particular area. And that might be a different coach from the one that you use for team formation. But I would encourage people at the beginning of the journey to don't spread yourself out too thin. Use one that can be laser focused on what success looks like for you, what winning looks like for you, and help you get there.
All right, here's another one. So with the trends in firms becoming larger and there being fewer and fewer solo advisors, are you seeing that some of the entrepreneurial spirit has been lost with the younger advisors? I guess to dive down a little bit more, is partnering with a senior advisor just a way to avoid the difficulty of building your book from scratch?
It's a good question. I know tons of advisors who put in the hard yards of the cold calling and the incredible effort with not a lot of results from the first couple of years of becoming a financial advisor. I'm convinced that those folks still exist. I always lose track of what our generations are: Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Millennial, and what's the latest one? Z Millennial or something? I don't even know. But I'm convinced that there are plenty of folks, plenty of hungry, young, talented people right out of college that have the elbow grease, they have the tenacity, they have the ability to go and do everything that advisors have come up in the industry and have worked so hard at the beginning of their practice. I've met many of them. It may be harder to find them. It may depend on where you're looking. But if you can find that individual and they can apply their talents, whether on a solo basis or on a team basis, you can reap the rewards of that. I would argue that there's no need to be a hero as a financial advisor. If you take one of those young, talented people and you put them in that solo spot and you say, hey, go and see how many cold calls you can make and how you can build your practice from scratch, there's no need to be a hero. If you have that ability anyway, imagine just how much you can unlock that when you partner with a senior advisor. It's not necessarily a crutch to partner with a senior advisor. So I think that's a little bit of a false equivalency. Like, you can be that incredible rainmaker as a solo practitioner or as a team. But I think you're going to get further hooking up with a team to be able to perform even better.
Actually, that feeds right into the next question is how do you avoid the pain that comes with giving a chance to a new person or a young advisor and having that person speak to a high profile client without it disrupting the business or really hurting the succession plan? I mean, sometimes it works because you bring in someone young and you have a client that's going to sell their business or leave it to their son or daughter. So it's a nice matching of the generations. But then, other times you might be worried about, all right, I'm bringing in someone young, and the older person, the owner of the business that's going to be leaving it to their heirs may not have a lot of confidence in this younger person if they're going to be running this deal.
It's a real issue. It's solvable. It takes, similar to that concept of the toe in the water, going slow, going steady. And I think also being upfront with the junior advisor that you're working with. What you don't want to do is dangle the possibility that they're going to inherit a multi-million-dollar revenue book, and then that was never the plan all along, or you left that vague, or that's where some of that work upfront to manage expectations is so critical, because you want to have an alignment of what that younger person, that next generation advisor, expects, and when they put in the blood, sweat, and tears on the client relationships, what that's going to lead to for them economically over time. Is there a succession plan? How are you thinking about it? And whenever possible, try to formalize that over time once you're convinced that it is a really good match. In terms of client meetings, I mean, there are all sorts of ways to sort of introduce somebody into client meetings without having them take center stage. And then, slowly but surely handling different parts of the client meetings and then letting them swim on their own when it comes to potentially smaller clients or referrals. So I think there's all sorts of ways to address that problem, but it's a real issue.
Does MassMutual have a mentorship program? Do you have
We
recommended
do.
Do you have recommended coaches? Is there a way to focus on insurance-focused agents becoming more versed with the investment side of the business?
Absolutely. Yes, yes, and yes. So we have a successful mentorship program called Connect for Success, where we hook up advisors and optimize their growth and their learning throughout the process. You bring up an interesting point, especially for companies that have been historically a little more insurance focused. You do have that skill set spread between people who are more adept on the investment side and then some who are more adept on the risk or protection side. We do all of that. We do the matchmaking. We find sometimes, geography matters. Some of those intangibles on personality matters, but geography matters. Being close enough to be able to have face-to-face meetings matters. And then having a complementary skill set and something where you can form a team based on your own unique ability to understand client needs. And a good example of that is insurance and investment together.
All right, Vaughn, we want to make sure everyone gets out on time. So why don't you give a quick wrap up, and then I'll do the official wrap up, and we'll let everyone get back to work.
Well, all I'll say, Greg, is just thanks for having me. This has been tremendous fun to do, and I really hope that our audience got something out of it. I've enjoyed working with you and getting this up and running. Look forward to getting feedback and talking to any one of you about your insights on this exact topic, which is really relevant today in the wealth management business.
All right, that was fantastic. So thank you once again to our speaker, Vaughn, for sharing your insights and expertise, and to everyone in the audience for taking the time to join us today. Stay tuned for our upcoming webinars. I'm Greg Greenberg from Investment News. Thanks for watching.
Thanks all.